Good evening. Thank y'all for being here this evening, and they've got their chairs too far apart for people to be married over 50 years, y'all. Come on in here closer. There you go. Dear friends, here today with me this evening, and Helen and Ken Clark, and I'm glad y'all are here to be with them, and welcome to all of you who are online with us this evening as well. To call it marriage. That institution that more closely represents the relationship that we're supposed to have, intimacy. And they're here to speak to that. And we've known each other for many years now. Many years. I've grown old around you. But Becky and I have had the opportunity to minister in Ireland with Bishop Ken and his family and in his diocese and lots of their friends over there. And what an opportunity that has been for us, a blessing for us in so many ways. Let me pray for you a second.
Thank you.
I'll turn it over to you. And Father, thank you for the wisdom that comes along with marriage. Half a century. A lot of trial and error. A lot of experiences. And we learn, Lord, from those things that we don't necessarily do right. But you bless us and redeem them.
Yeah.
And you draw us closer together for it. Closer to you and closer to each other. Lord, I thank you for the fact that Ken and Helen are as close as they are because they're both intimately close to you. And as they're grown closer to you, they've grown closer and closer to each other and to family and children and grandchildren. Lord, I ask you to bless their words, that their words might be a blessing to us.
Yes, Lord.
In your name I do pray, Lord. Amen and
Amen.
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 All right, Helen, let me put this over here for you.
Well, thank you very, very much, Father Chuck. And on behalf of Helen and I, we just want to say we are thrilled to be here and genuinely privileged. We will be extremely happy at 7:30 when this is over, because if you do any public speaking, you know how you feel before you speak. But Helen and I want to say this with all of you. A very, very happy anniversary, Chuck and Becky. 51 years together today. Fantastic. I'm not sure how good Chuck is at remembering birthdays and wedding anniversaries, but I used to say to brides and grooms in Ireland, if I was marrying a couple, I often would have said in the wedding service now to the husband or to the new husband, the groom, I'd say, one of the things that's important to remember is that for many, many wives, it actually means a lot when her husband remembers his wife's birthday or your wedding anniversary. Would you agree here in the States? Yeah? Okay. And then I'd say to the groom, let me give you a piece of advice. The best way to remember your wife's birthday is forget it once. You will never forget it again. That is for sure and certain. But thank you all for coming tonight. We know that you could be doing lots of other things tonight. And whether you're married or single or whatever your particular situation is, please know you are so welcome. We thought it might be helpful just at the beginning to give a little bit of a background, very briefly, about both of us, where we're coming from. And I grew up, this is probably my claim to fame actually, I grew up in the same town as Rory McIlroy. Yes, and friends, we went to the same school. But there's 40 years between us. And I would love to tell you I taught him all he knows about golf. But if I told you that, I would have to ask the Lord to forgive me. I play a little bit of golf, but not like Rory McIlroy. My golf I describe as apostolic. Because like the apostles, I go here, there, and everywhere when I play golf. But it's great because you get maximum exercise. I'm an only child. My mum was a Presbyterian from the depths of County Antrim in Northern Ireland. My dad was Anglican from a Church of Ireland parish in Belfast called Willowfield. And I was born in 1949. And at a barbecue of young people, Helen and I first met. And that was a memorable meeting. I let Helen tell you where she came from, because we've come from very different backgrounds.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for being gracious enough to not just enjoy this lovely meal, for which we're very grateful, but to indulge us in, we are not standing here as experts in marriage.
Correct.
Absolutely not. We are, yes, 50 years married, but we're definitely learning. And every day we learn something. So please understand that we are not the experts, but we will share honestly and openly as we go along. Growing up, I'm one of 6, Ken's an only child, and his parents died when he was very young. I grew up right down in the south of Ireland, in Cork, as one of 6 siblings in a ministry home. So that's actually quite relevant to what we'll be talking about, because I came from a tribe and Ken came from a home where he was an only child. And I must say, in 1967, when I went to start my nurse training in Belfast, through a Christian friend, I met this guy. Honestly, I was so unimpressed. I just couldn't cope with his noisy extroversion, and it took a while.
Friends, do you know what she said to me the first time we met? I mean, I'd heard about this beautiful girl who was training to be a nurse called Helen Good. Helen's maiden name is Good. And I thought, oh, I can't wait to meet this girl. So this was a barbecue of a girls' Bible class and a boys' Bible class, and my friend wanted to introduce me to Helen. Helen arrived, and I thought, oh, yes. And I just was showing a friendly, relational approach to this girl from Cork. Do you know what she said to me? I have met your type before. However, we have a God of amazing grace, and even though it didn't start pretty good, it finished up very well. And during the course of our friendship, when I was praying for God's guidance, although I knew what my heart's desire was, but praying for God's guidance about this relationship, you have no idea. My soul leapt within me when I read the words of the Apostle Paul, cleave to that which is good. So we've been cleaving in marriage for 51 years in June this year. Helen, will we get going now? Okay. I don't know if you've seen this sign on a church notice board. We thought it was relevant to our theme this evening. If you have troubles, come in and tell us about them. If you have none, come in and tell us how you do it. Because a reality of life and a reality of marriage is that we have our ups and downs, our highs and our lows, our incredible joy and sometimes deep frustration. We've explained a little bit about where we're coming from. This is a photograph from our wedding day. And I know some of you will be amazed that it's in color. The original wasn't in color, okay? But it's amazing what can be done now. And where we're coming from is this. The Bible is the basis and the foundation of our lives and our marriage, actually. With all our hearts, we want to do what God teaches in his Bible about his purposes for the human race and his purposes for you and me as individuals, and what his purpose is for marriage. And I wonder, were some of you coming here tonight expecting to see some doddery old couple like this because it was advertised they have over 100 years of marriage? Well, that was deliberate, because Helen has over 50 years experience of marriage and I have over 50 years experience. And have you noticed in marriages, those who are married, sometimes we have different perceptions? No. Oh, that's wonderful. You know, we remember the same conversation in slightly different ways. Isn't that right? So where we're coming from is the biblical teaching, foundational and most important, but also over 100 years of learning together in a marriage relationship. Again, just by way of introduction, we do believe that marriage originally was not a man's idea or a woman's idea. It was actually God's idea. It was his plan, part of his purpose. Read the first few chapters of Genesis. When I was ordained, the preface in our marriage service in the Church of Ireland was, marriage is an institution of God, created in man's innocency. Right back at the beginning, it was God's will that man should not be alone. And man and woman, man and wife, were created to be together in a union that was the closest possible union between two human beings. And I love these words of Jesus, which are foundational in our thinking on what marriage is. If we're coming from a Christian viewpoint, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. There is no closer possible human relationship. And it's God's best. And remember, even though sometimes we find it difficult to see this, God actually wants the best for you and the best for me. And isn't it interesting that in the teaching of the apostles, especially Paul, the relationship between Christ and the church is compared to the relationship between a husband and a wife. The church is the bride of Christ. Christ is the bridegroom. And I don't know about you, but I'm excited about that day when the bridegroom, Jesus, will return for his bride, the church. And I tell you, if you think the supper this evening was good, nothing compared to the heavenly wedding banquet, the marriage feast of the Lamb that we will enjoy together. So this is where we're coming from. We honestly believe the teaching of the Bible is as up to date as today's newspapers and magazines. And it's his teaching that we want to follow. Helen.
We just want to say right at the outset that we are, as we say, quite a long time on this road of marriage. And we do realize, and we've had a fair deal of it in our own family, that marriage can also represent pain for some people. So we want to acknowledge that for some in the room tonight, speaking about Christian marriage will represent some pain. We respect that, but we do want nonetheless to talk together about Christian marriage. And just this representation here of God, you, and the other, and that is where there's stability, and stability in relationships through primary trust and dependence on God. So we are talking tonight about Christian marriage, and that threefold cord that is not easily broken. Ecclesiastes 4:12b, a threefold cord is not easily broken when it is intertwined and strengthened. Because we really want to say at the outset that the more we individually depend on the Lord, the more secure we will be and firmly rooted in relationship with him. And we actually believe in Christian marriage that's fundamental, because actually that frees the other to want the best for the other, rather than actually having a relationship that is needy and over-dependent and not releasing of each other. That dependence and reliance and security in the Lord actually allows each other space to grow and develop in our own individual lives and walk with God. And it has the best in mind for the other. That kind of love is releasing, not needy and anxious. helping one another in all the joys as well as the sorrows that life presents. And let's be real tonight, friends. We have a lot of joy in life, but there can be an immense amount of sorrow. Often sorrow we're least expecting. But when our marriages and relationships are rooted in relationship with the Lord, that is a releasing, secure foundation on which to build. That is when we can pray with and for each other and seeking God's blessing and best for the other. We want to share a few thoughts tonight, and really, what can we do in an hour? I mean, when we do marriage seminars, it can be over a space of different weeks. But so we've chosen tonight to talk about communication. Healthy, active, two-way communication is vital if any relationship is going to thrive and survive. I think we're all agreed. It's good to talk, but actually it's far more important to be good listeners. I'm sure all of us in the room would agree that in any relationship that's meaningful and healthy to us, it's dependent on good communication. And good communication does not mean always talking. Those involved in marriage and relationship counseling would say that more than, and I think it's probably up higher than this, more than 80% of problems arise in marriage are linked to poor communication. I think we all know, and somebody quipped earlier about surviving marriage in the pandemic, and you're not alone in that, I can tell you. There are many, many people we have listened with and talked with who really struggled with being locked down at home with the other. But it is so easy in relationships to drift apart, live independently, as we call married singles, losing that desire to make an effort to work at meaningful, effective communication. We celebrated 50 years, as we said, and Father Chuck and Becky are celebrating 51 years. We actually see that as an immense privilege and blessing. But I can tell you, standing here, there's never been a time when we haven't had to work at our communication. And I can only reflect in this past year on a very tragic, heartbreaking situation, tragic in our family. I say we were raised by 4 daughters.
That's why my hair is gone, by the way. I was living with 5 women all those years.
Ken said there was never a week in the month when he didn't have PMT.
No, I had it every week of the month. They just had it for a few days.
But in that situation in our family, which we did not plan for or expect, where we've had a tragedy for one of our daughters, we had to work at how we communicated with each other. I was hurting so badly as a mom. Ken was hurting so badly as a protective dad. We had to work at how we communicated with each other and how the perspectives that we had on this situation. And what we realize, friends, and I do want to encourage you in this, is what breaks our hearts does not have to destroy our lives. That's from Psalm 34:18. What breaks our hearts does not have to destroy our lives. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. So if you're going through maybe an unexpected illness or a tragedy in your family and in your marriage, just allow God to be the one that draws close and helps you to draw closer to Him and to each other. In marriage, it's about considering, as we've said, the other. And we're not going to get into it tonight, but do you know anything about each other's love languages? We had to learn a lot about that. It is so easy to build walls and barriers and withdraw into our own world of thoughts and feelings. Because so easily in relationships and in marriage, patterns can develop that really are basically selfish, all about me. Easy to isolate others, be self-absorbed and have an all-about-me attitude, and that can happen so easily in marriage. They say that women expect to communicate with their husbands at least 45 minutes a day. Husbands are fine with 15 minutes. That's a generalization, I realize. You know what women's greatest fear is? He doesn't want to talk. Men's greatest fear is, oh, she wants to talk again. And can we just say, I mean, we're flying through this, but it's no joke to say, how do you manage smartphones and social media? And that's a very, very serious threat to some relationships these days. Are you managing how you manage social media? We had a family reunion, my six of us siblings and our spouses, and we went on holiday together last year. And one evening we discovered all of us were on our smartphones trying to connect with home. And we did actually apologize to each other and put the wretched things down and realize we're actually here to communicate with each other. Are we guilty of living on our own island and simply not bothering? You know that attitude thing where it just can't be bothered, don't feel understood, or that faceless Facebook. Actually, communication that's effective will be about putting the other first. I have many single friends whom I really value relationship with, but again, we need to take thought and time as to how we, and consideration on both sides, as how we keep communication going. The other thing I want to say, just for those who are in the room who have young children, don't beat yourself up. There are different seasons in relationships and in marriage, and deep communication can happen in different ways, sometimes in silence. Sometimes on car journeys, we're very okay to drive for quite a long distance and not talk, but we are in communication, we're comfortable. So for those of you who have young babies and small children and are sleep deprived, actually it's about survival. We have kids who have kids, and we understand that stage. And we do say, please do not beat yourselves up and feel guilty all the time. I have one daughter who says, how do I live without feeling like the guilty parent? Because she's working full time.
Just to give an illustration of that, when our first daughter was born, she reminded me of what somebody said, that sometimes little babies are to remind us of Al-Qaeda because they're into sleep deprivation tactics. And this was entirely true of our first daughter, whom we love and adore. But, oh dear, when she was in her first few weeks and first couple of months, she had dreadful colic. I can still see our Ali doubled over like this, and we tried to help her. And it was both day and night. And I know you're going to misunderstand what I'm about to say, but she was born on the 2nd of May. And we went away for a week's holiday in June to the home of a Presbyterian minister called the Manse up in Ballycastle in the north of Northern Ireland. Helen and I were in bed for most of that week. Now, why I said you're going to misunderstand, we could not sleep day or night. So we just had to, we rarely got out of the bedroom with Ali except to get some food because the poor little kid was so restless. So the nights were completely disturbed, daytime was completely disturbed, and to try and communicate with each other at a time like that was some challenge. So, you know, as Helen so rightly says, there are different seasons, and if you're a mum and dad or husband and wife with little kids, that season does pass. But roll on the teenage years when everything's just, you know. So
we sometimes say in the teen years, you really are handling a remote control, and you're trying to surf on their channel, and you're trying to get on their wavelength, and once you've got it sussed, it changes. So maybe for you that hasn't been your experience. We had 4 teenagers together because our children were very close in age. But I want to be honest and say, communication hasn't always been easy for us. When we were in a very busy parish, a bit like this parish that you're in, and I think Ken would agree with me, he was a workaholic, And we had 4 teenage girls. I was nursing part-time. Notes left on the kitchen table. We were ships in the night. And it got to the stage where actually I could not be bothered because I was just too tired of trying to work at communicating with this workaholic husband. And the worst thing was he was in the ministry. I mean, really. And everybody thought he was wonderful. And I thought, yeah, but you don't live at home with... I felt like a lone parent. And we talk about that now, and we talk to our girls about that because we're not proud of it. But it took both of us to stop in our manic tracks, to take a look at our lives and to humble ourselves and reorder our priorities. Another part of communication is proximity, being close in present with those you love. And when there's no dialogue and meaningful communication, there can be emotional distance. So maybe you need to work at being physically in proximity and closer as well. Understanding and accepting each other's style of communication. And also, it is stating the obvious to say, communication and intimacy are intrinsically linked. Too often, barriers to communication when there are issues of control, bullying, manipulation, those are very serious areas. And we obviously don't have time to speak into those, but if you're in a relationship where there's too much control, manipulation, or bullying, we suggest you need to get some help.
And Helen has this wonderful phrase, touch and tell. You know, if we're at a difficult point in communication with each other, it's probably not advisable for husband to sit in one corner of the room and wife to sit in the other corner of the room, you know, having a shouting match. Helen has this great phrase about touch and tell. Sit beside each other and touch each other and talk it out. Help me, can I understand where you're coming from in this? You know, so the listening is going on, as Helen said. And that time, which I'm not proud of at all, when I really was a workaholic, I will never forget a dramatic moment which led to change. And it was in the middle of the night, and our telephone went at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was not only rector of a large parish at that time, I was a hospital chaplain too, and the hospital phoned us at 3 o'clock in the morning. This was the third night in a row that the hospital phoned me to go and visit someone in the hospital. Third night in a row. And I'll never forget getting out of our bed and in the dark kind of looking for my trousers and trying to pull them on. And I remember vividly saying to Helen, I cannot live like this anymore.
And I said, amen, Lord. Just secretly.
Helen's prayers were answered. But seriously, if we find we're in a situation like that, we are the only people who can do anything about it. So it is time to do something about it, because it's not a healthy way to live. It's not contributing to a healthy marriage. Communication is vital. And time to listen to each other. That question, the third one down there, how do we keep in touch with each other? One of the things we have found helpful over many years, and indeed when the girls were teenagers, we'd often do this. Before bedtime at night, we'd go out for a walk together and just chat, communicate with one another, both listening and talking. That's what we find helpful. You may find so. I was listening to a couple today, and the husband was telling me when he comes home from work in the evening, they have tea together and chat about what's been going on in the day. You know, whatever fits your particular marriage, go for it. But make it a priority, because it is a top priority. How well do we know our partner? Are we in a marriage where actually we're like a brother and sister relationship? Or is it a husband and wife relationship? And also in communication, all the communication experts will tell us that communication is far, far more than just words, isn't it? It's interesting, I know this isn't a seminar in parenting, but isn't it interesting when you have kids, they are all so different. They come from the same source. But with one of our girls in the area of discipline, we only had to look at her, a certain look, and that was it. She'd respond. With another daughter, you could look at her for 12 months and it wouldn't have made 1 ounce of difference. You know, they're just so different, and we're so different in our marriage. And communication is far, far more than words. As I say, the experts will tell us it's the tone of voice we use, it's your eyes. Helen will sometimes say to me, and I need to listen, I want you to look at me when you're listening. You see,
One of our children will phone and she'll say, Dad, are you watching a screen? Because when you're done, ring me back.
and they pick it up because it means a lot to Helen. I mean, I know I can multitask, but I have learned that actually it means a lot to Helen if she's speaking to me and saying something that I actually look at her, because we can listen with our eyes as well as our ears. The tone of voice in which we speak, the body language. I mean, men, I know nobody in the Low Country would ever do this. It would only happen in Ireland. Can you imagine at a beautiful romantic moment saying to your beautiful wife, I love you? Sorry, I wakened some people up there. I do apologize. But how romantic did that sound? 1,000,000 miles away from anything romantic. You see, the tone of voice that we use. There was a young lad was falling in love with a girl, and he was going to ring her up, and he'd prepared a lovely way to kind of introduce the conversation. So he phoned, the phone was answered, and he said, hello, is that you, Dreamboat? It was her dad had answered the phone. He said, no, this isn't the Dreamboat. This is the supply ship. The dads will know the meaning of that. So when we're thinking of communication, folks, the communication experts tell us 7% of communication is words, 38% tone of voice, 55% body language. And I think we men are maybe a bit slower in understanding that than our good women friends are. But this is all part of communication. Here's a question, just for a few moments. We'd love you just as a couple to have a discussion together, or if you're not a couple, you're here with a friend, maybe discuss it just for a couple of minutes. Are there certain things you think we can do to strengthen communication in our relationship? Now, please, this is not a counseling session. This is not a get at you time, okay? But it's just for a couple of moments. Just have a little think about this. Are there certain things I could do that would strengthen communication in our relationship? Okay. And literally 2 or 3 minutes, so we have to be quick. Thank you. Darling, that was so clear. Oh, it was brilliant.
stand aside.
Just go to the side there. Would that be okay? He appears to be very good listener.
Really?
I do.
I would.
Get over and get scared when I see that on the side, because it's the two of us on the stage.
I'd stop it now. I think stop it now.
I told you it would be short. May we say TBC, to be continued, all right? When you're walking or sitting on the couch or settee or in the sunroom or whatever. Now, the last time we did some teaching on marriage with the Church of the Cross, we showed a little video, and we want to show it again. One of the reasons is it is superb. I wonder, have you noticed, ladies and gentlemen, that there are certain characteristics of the brain of a man, and there are certain characteristics of the brain of a woman. Have you know? Does that only happen in Ireland? There are certain little nuances that are different. We see things differently. We think, okay, you will love this, but it actually underlines some of the points that we've been making about communication and understanding a little bit about the other person and how well we know our partner. Enjoy. It is called A Tale of Two Brains.
We're going to start discussing men's brains, women's brains, and how they're very different from each other. Now, I want to start with men's brains. All right? Now, men's brains are very unique. Men's brains are made up of little boxes. And we have a box for everything. We've got a box for the car. We've got a box for the money. We've got a box for the job. We've got a box for you. We've got a box for the kids. We've got a box for your mother somewhere in the basement. We got boxes everywhere. And the rule is the boxes don't touch. When a man discusses a particular subject, we go to that particular box, we pull that box out, we open the box, we discuss only what is in that box. All right? And then we close the box and put it away, being very, very careful not to touch any other boxes. Brains are very, very different from men's brains. Women's brains are made up of a big ball of wire. And everything is connected to everything. The money's connected to the car, and the car's connected to your job, and your kids are connected to your mother, and everything's connected to everything. It's just like... It's like the internet superhighway, okay? And it's all driven by energy that we call emotion. It's just... It's one of the reasons why women tend to remember everything. Because if you take an event and you connect it to an emotion, it burns in your memory and you can remember it forever. The same thing happens for men. It just doesn't happen very often because, quite frankly, we don't care. Women tend to care about everything. And she just loves it. Okay? Now, men, we have a box in our brain that most women are not aware of. This particular box has nothing in it. It's true. It's true. In fact, we call it the nothing box. And of all the boxes a man has in his brain, the nothing box is our favorite box. If a man has a chance, he'll go to his nothing box every time. That's why a man can do something seemingly completely brain dead for hours on end. You know, like fishing. Now, they've actually measured this. The University of Pennsylvania a couple of years ago did a study and discovered that men have the ability to think about absolutely nothing and still breathe. You know, they connected all the wires and stuff like that and watched the brain activity, then all of a sudden, I think he's dead. Huh? You know, women can't do it. They can't do it. Their minds never stop. And they don't understand the nothing box. And it drives them crazy. Because nothing drives a woman more crazy or makes her feel more irritated than to witness a man doing nothing.
Well, I think, you know, some of what we're saying tonight is just not rocket science. We are different.
Does it ring any bells?
When we go on holiday and Ken's mind shuts down and he's looking out at the ocean, and I'll say, "What are you thinking about?" And he said, "Nothing." Is that not okay? And my mind will be, whoa. One of the things we just want to simply name is value and appreciate we are different.
Yeah.
We don't want to be uniform and all the same. Value and celebrate difference. One of the things that has been hugely significant for us in our marriage is appreciating how different we are.
Are we different? Really?
It may take a little bit of work to work out in our marriage who is the extrovert, who loves busy around people, talks outside his head a lot, their head a lot, a preference for extroversion, loves being with people, interacting. We have a sort of understanding when we're leaving the house, if the phone goes, I say, "Don't answer it." Ken will say, "I think I just might, because there might be a change of plan." He loves a change of plan. I do not like a change of plan. My personality is where I process inside my head, I'm more reflective, and then maybe carefully express my thoughts and opinions. But folks, one is not right and the other is not wrong. We are just so different. But value and appreciate and compliment difference.
And do you notice the words on the screen there about a great marriage? A great marriage is not when the perfect couple comes together. It is when an imperfect couple learns to enjoy their differences. The famous church leader Rick Warren has said on occasions when he's talking about marriage, when opposites fall in love, they attract. When they get married, they attack. Some of us in marriages have had that experience. We are learning to love one another, to listen to one another, to value difference, to respect one another. When it comes to our physical relationship with each other, have you noticed that we are different? Have you ever seen this little illustration before? With a man one switch. Way! But the woman, as we were hearing earlier, there's all sorts of little switches and buttons and all sorts of permutations. We are different, but thank God we're different. That's part of our attraction to one another. That's the way God has made us. Now, some very practical points about communication.
Yeah, just to be very practical this evening and to maybe suggest to you that you might have a conversation around this with each other at another time. A few key considerations that we agreed on together before tonight. And one of the biggest is, for strengthening marriages and relationships, have good manners with each other. Be respectful. Because actually healthy respect and consideration helps communication. So good manners with each other. We have this understanding that we didn't always have, that we don't put each other down in front of other people. We actually try to have that conversation together. Tell your partner what it is really matters to you. Ken has said that we have 4 girls. And you know this thing where you say, what would you like? And you say, oh, nothing, it's okay, it doesn't matter. And then Ken will say to me, no, just tell me, what is it you really would like? And that can be on the small issues or it can be on the bigger matters. Learn to communicate with each other what it is you really, really want. Men are not the best mind readers sometimes, so we need to actually spell it out. Even in household chores, sometimes Ken will say to me, you didn't actually ask me to do that. And I say, well, I didn't think I should have to ask you to do that. And he'd say, no, just ask me and I'll do it. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No manipulation and proximity. Be close to one another if you've got something to say, particularly if it's something that is more difficult. We try not to use the accusative, you never do, your mother said, da, da, da. It's really much more about, help me understand, or what do you think, or did I hear this right? As they say, I don't know what I've said until I hear what you've heard. Watch distractions, that undivided, attentive attention. Don't assume. Sometimes we make assumptions.
Yeah.
We have this thing that happens often between us even now, where Ken will say, or I will, let me finish my sentence. I think that rings a bell with some others, because we've assumed something that isn't actually the full story. We're learning all the time. Stop talking and just listen. This is a big, big thing in marriage. And one of the things that Ken has done for me, which I really appreciate, is when we were at home with 4 teenagers and he came in from work, he would come to me. He'd say to the girls, I'll hear you out, but first I want to listen to Mum. And he came in to wherever I was and gave me undivided attention to unpack our day, even for a short time. Do you know, to this day, that means so much to me, because I felt respected, valued, and understood. So I'm very grateful for that. Pray together. So many couples that we know who are Christians actually don't pray with and for each other. We're going to come back to this, but be humble enough to say, sorry, I got that wrong, and choose loving behaviors.
Choose loving behavior. There are different people praying for this workshop here this evening in Ireland and on this side of the Atlantic. And there's there are good friends of ours, a bishop and his wife here in the States, and they were in touch with us. And I just said to them yesterday what was happening, and they said they'd pray for us. And I said, any advice to give at this marriage workshop? And this is what they said. Marriage is about the fruit of the Spirit with Christ in the center. Marriage requires humility, daily repentance, forgiveness, laughter, and love, love, love. So that was their advice for this marriage workshop. Listening to each other. Yes?
Just Ken mentioned there about laughter. Ken has taught me how to laugh and lighten up. because I actually can take life quite seriously at times, and I do get concerned and anxious about people. And he has helped me so much. I think you've gathered he laughs a lot, but it's just when it's appropriate to help each other to lighten up and laugh.
And Helen has taught me to be more reflective, and I appreciate that, because Helen will think things through. Now, not to the extent of a paralysis of analysis, which is one extreme, but just, to be more thoughtful, and I really appreciate that. Vital in communication and in any relationship is trust, that we trust each other. I remember being at a brilliant session for church leaders led by the well-known Stuart Briscoe, who's now about 90 years old, a well-known pastor up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I remember him saying to these leaders, when you go to a church and you're the new pastor or rector or vicar, in your first few years, there are two top priorities. Number one, establish credibility, and number two, demonstrate consistency. It's the same in marriage. Trust is about establishing credibility, demonstrating consistency. I trust Helen 200%. And trust is right at the foundation. I love this quote in the bottom right-hand corner. A relationship without trust is like a car without gas. You can stay in it all you want, but it won't go anywhere. Are we deepening our trust in one another? And the trust comes with being honest with one another. Not having big secrets, not living a double life, not having shadow missions men. A very good friend of ours who's a marriage counselor has this wonderful saying, in openness there is strength. In secrecy there is weakness. Love is spelt T-I-M-E. If we don't make time for each other, and let's be honest, we sometimes have to make time. Put it in the diary. We're going out on a date night. When our girls were very young and growing up, once a year, my parents, as Helen said, were both dead, so we didn't have grandparents on my side of the family. But once a year, Helen's parents, who lived over 300 miles away, would allow us to get away or facilitate us getting away for one night together in the year. Honestly, we called that a mini-moon. A mini-moon. But just to have that quality time together without kids interrupting and asking questions, honestly, that was gold dust. Let's make time for each other.
And can we just suggest that for those who are our generation, do that for your kids.
Yeah.
Give them the gift of time alone together where you look after their kids.
Change the climate of our marriage, friends. Time together. As Helen mentioned earlier, the relationship with my spouse is far more important than this. Don't allow these things to completely take over our lives. And a final point, and I really had to learn this in the early years of our marriage. Marriage is about us. It's not about me. And if I could just say something to the men here, because I think we do this more than the girls do. Sometimes as a man, and I did this, that's why I share it with you, we get married, but we continue living like a bachelor. We are now married, folks. It's about us. It's we together. It's not I. It's not me. Marriage is a lifelong course in learning to be unselfish. We were missionaries in the south of Chile for some years. And we lived in the house in the center of a city called Valdivia in the south of Chile. And I have to be honest, and I say this to my shame, my work was more important to me than my marriage and family. And I will never forget one time we had a basement in our house where I would cut logs to put into the log burner to heat the radiators. I was so convicted by God by the way I was living that I completely broke down. And I will never forget lying in the sawdust and saying sorry to God for the way I'd been living, and sorry to Helen for not being the husband. And honestly, the key issue for me, and this was several years into our marriage, I was still trying to live like a single man rather than it being about us, not about me. So, to bring it all together, because we are finishing by 7:30, as promised, let's go for the best. Remember way back at the beginning, marriage is God's will, it's God's best. I hope we'll go away from here this evening, chat about some of the things that we heard. Different things will relate to different folks, but let's remember these basic principles and priorities. Prioritize communication. Celebrate difference. Listen well. Love changes everything. The song's got that right. And marriage is about us, not about me. And the strongest marriages will be when the Lord Jesus Christ is our foundation and God is first. Helen.
As we were preparing for this evening and praying about this evening, we really believed that God was laying on our hearts the importance of this threefold cord that is not easily broken. And that actually for some in the room, it was about inviting God back into his rightful place in your marriage and in your relationships. And we have a sense that for some in this room, this will take humility, it will take seeking to show grace, and it'll be willingness to forgive. We were in an airport lounge on our way here when I logged in to your Ash Wednesday service. And I think I'm right in Father Chuck saying, let us be walking reminders of heavenly grace, showing one another amazing grace because of the grace the Lord has poured out to us.
Amen.
I'll just read it again. Let us be walking reminders of heavenly grace, showing one another amazing grace because of the grace the Lord has poured out to us. We would stand here tonight as those who humbly say, but for the grace of God, I don't know where we would be or our marriages. I know there can be some good, strong marriages without God at the center, but for us and for Christian marriage, God must be in his rightful place, right at the center. And so in this threefold cord, just in airport lounges and on the way here, I've put together 3 threads, and the center one is red for the grace of God, and the other 2 are you and your spouse. Some of them I got time to braid, most of them I didn't, but at the door as you go out, there's one for each couple. And could we just humbly, lovingly, prayerfully suggest that you choose to show grace in your relationships? We want to choose to show grace and humility, willingness to forgive, that we invite God right back into the center of our marriage and relationships, and that we choose to trust that the threefold cord will not be easily broken. There's a lot out there militating against God's best in marriage. Let's stand strong. And that's one of the precious things you have in your church, of standing strong together and supporting each other. So there's one of these at the door for every couple.
So, dear friends, God bless you. God bless your marriages. And may we all discover God's best for each one of us. Thank you.